So here's the detailed look at the workflow of what I spoke about in one of my posts, which is building high accuracy automations, high accuracy workflows. The use case here is I have a list of companies, which is this, and I want to know if these companies are mentioned in a certain source. The sources we are going to be using here are 2 earnings calls, and I know it sounds much more straightforward than it is. Just ask the LLM if the company is in there, and probably there's one prompt out there which does it. What I can say is I've tried a lot of different versions of this prompt, many different prompting approaches in order to get this done, and the core thing here is to get it done to near 100% accuracy. I'm gonna say it's very easy to do it to good accuracy. It's very hard to do it for near 100% accuracy. And it's really the classic hallucination thing that comes in here. So what I'm gonna walk through is what were the challenges and what are my solutions. I'm actually not gonna so much about the challenges because I deleted the approaches that didn't work. I have one screenshot that looked a little bit like this, where you see that like this comes up with a lot of companies that are not mentioned. Here, like Tesla, Microsoft, Google are in the output, as in those companies are mentioned and they are on the list. They are not on the list. They may be mentioned, but it doesn't really matter. That's too inaccurate, so it's not an approach that works. And yeah, this is what I'm going to show. This is going to be the clean version of that build. So there are no experiments in here that didn't work. This is only what worked for me. This is a result of a well-constructed Google search that gives me always the seeking alpha transcript. I believe I will not be able to show it because I run into the paywall, but this is kind of the transcript, which is also one of the problems that I want to speak about, because the limitations are when you use a Clagent for that. In many cases, it may not be able to reliably access that. I'm gonna go over the challenges very quickly. The context window limits, I know it's like you would think that this is not a problem, but the reality is when you throw a local LLM or an LLM on local data on 2 earnings calls, which I've scraped, it's already too many tokens, because you have a limit in Clay of 16,000 tokens when you use the Clay managed account, and you have your own limit, which supposedly is a little bit higher. I couldn't find information on it, but it also didn't work when you use your own API key. So you just can't throw 2 earnings calls at generate text with AI in Clay, and this is a big problem for that. You could do it with like individual earnings calls, but then it will also not work on 10Ks or 10Qs because they are much more massive. And I'm not going to go into that. It's again a different beast, but I really want to show it with the earnings calls, which already were too voluminous. And what I talked about, the hallucinations, I don't want like any company names coming up that are not actually in there. The solutions that I'm going to show is really scraping the sources with the right settings, adapting the use of the LLM, basically a different logic how to extract the information, and then making semi-extensive use of formulas. It's not going to be something like super crazy, but this is really the approach that worked for me after a few hours of trying. So here's the input, the 2 earnings calls, and then there's a lot of try and error even in getting the scraping right. So sometimes Zenrose works really well, sometimes I use the Clay integrated scraper. I currently don't use any APIs for scraping, because I kind of get to what I need with what's integrated, and I have like good own keys for example Zenrose, so it's not like super expensive or anything. The settings that worked for me, and I want to be really clear that those settings probably won't work, or for sure don't work all of the time. In this case they did. I just feed it the URL no auto parse, and then what was really important to ask for the body text as an output, and then using the premium proxy. I believe that is what gets us around the paywall that shows up after you like accessed seeking alpha for like 10 times or 15 times or something like that. I don't know. I didn't have any advantage using the anti-bot thing here, which is great because it would have been expensive. So with these settings, and this is a lot of I just try things out. I don't even exactly know specifically what every individual toggle does in detail. I'm just trying things out, and at one point you develop some muscle memory for what could work, and you can start with that, but it's still going to be a lot of experimentation. That works reliably on every case I tried. This is like 9-10 companies in here, and here I have the whole text of the earnings call because it's a transcript of that. That worked all of the time. This is actually a support column because what I've shown is that I want to know if these companies are mentioned, none of the other companies, and this is basically just those companies that I have them here in Clay available. You can also integrate those directly into a prompt, but I've had good experience with mapping that out and having that in an individual column that I can point a prompt to. And here's a major difference. When you, and I really should have kept that in the workflow, when you point a Clayagent at a task like this and you ask, hey, tell me if in the latest 2 earnings calls of Snowflake any of these 20 companies is mentioned. This is where, when you want to build it for an outbound use case, I would say it's probably good enough because you will have quite some hallucinations in there and you will not be able to control where those names actually come from. So it may or may not be an hallucination. It may be that in the past there was like a time when whatever, Deloitte worked together with Snowflake on something as a global systems integrator, but my client specifically wants to know if it's mentioned in the last 2 earnings calls, so it's recent information. And there's always ways you can tweak and tune that, and Clayagent is absolutely amazing for this kind of research, but if you need very high accuracy, it's not cutting it because it pulls from like uncontrollable sources, I would say, and it's also very hard to really verify where is this coming from. So this is the approach that I used. I wanted to have the data locally, the scrapes, and then I run 2 different LLMs on the local data with the same prompt. So in this case, I use a Gemini because it can handle the context really well. And I use the same prompt with a haiku, which is good at doing this and so cheap that it's basically free for even those large amounts of data. This is the prompt. Since this is the YouTube version of this, I'm going to get into the prompt. And I don't know, maybe I just like go over the prompt. I, at the moment, start with like right in the beginning of the prompt, do this step by step, take your time to do this, accuracy is key, read the whole prompt first, and then begin your work. It's okay if this takes time and if it involves a lot of work. This is just something I don't even tell it, this is context, whatever, it's right in the beginning of the prompt. Then my prompting framework I use here is role, task, rules, and output. I would say it's easy to say, oh, this is the best prompt pattern you can use. I don't know. I would have to test this on a much larger scale. It works for me, and I'm currently following this pattern for cases like this. So the role is you are a data and financial analyst with 20 years of experience. I'm always a little bit like, I don't know if this 20 years of experience is actually true, that it helps, but I don't know. I see it and I keep it in here. You're amazing at reading and understanding financial documents, and you have extensive knowledge of what is a company name versus the name of a person or a place. Task. Your task is to identify all company names mentioned in a set of documents. Step 1, read the documents. This is then the 2 earnings calls. Step 2, identify all company names listed in the data from step 1. Step 3, return the results from step 2. Be exhaustive, but only return company names that are in the provided documents from step 1. This is really detailed to minimize with prompting the chance of hallucinations. Can I guarantee that there will be no hallucination in there? I cannot. Can I make as sure as possible that they are not? This is my way to do it. Then I kind of have this rules thing that I'm more experimenting with, and I could say this is like the best thing since sliced bread. But the rule is only look at the data I provide. Don't jump to a conclusion because you know stuff about Snowflake that whatever, like this company has been associated with Snowflake in the past, a lot of like LLM knowledge puts whatever Deloitte in connection with Snowflake, hence I output Deloitte. I don't want that. I wanted to only look at the data I provide. This is why this is in here as a rule. And then this is kind of key for this too. I hope everything is key because it's like a prompt that I experimented a lot with. And then the output, only output the identified company names, output them between curly braces, do not comment or explain on the results, sort them A to Z. What I find extremely fascinating is, like, I believe one of the most consistent sentences I have in prompts is do not comment or explain on the results. I don't even know if that's proper English. But that otherwise you get this, based on my research, you don't want all of that. And this is like super key and super helpful for me. And then sort them A to Z. Maybe I could have even left that out there. I like having the LLM not having to do this work. So honestly, I guess this shouldn't even be in here because it's better to do it like with a formula. The reason I have it in is it gave me even initially a good idea of the output, because when you don't sort it A to Z, like it's like other companies are being pulled in here. This gave me a better idea. But anyways, because it still doesn't catch all of the companies. It doesn't catch companies that aren't in there, but it doesn't catch all of the companies. And for that reason, I'm using a different LLM with the same prompt, which will produce a different output. It will catch other companies. This is kind of my safeguard of missing a company. Because of the prompt and based on my verification, they both don't make up companies that are not in there, but they don't catch all of the companies, which is good. I'm happy to have another run versus having to sort things out that are not in there. That's much more difficult. This is why I use the approach of at least 2 models to do this. Now that I talk about it, I could have built in an AI verification of like, hey, these are the company names, tell me if they are actually in there. I didn't do it because I did the verification manually, which is then using a formula that, of course, I always use the AI formula creator because, I don't know, who knows, to write the stringify JSON JavaScript formula anyways. So in this case, I just say, because I have like these 2 LLM runs that give me company names, in this case, I just say combine those 2 responses, response from Gemini, response from Anthropic, and return only uniques. So I don't have like AWS in there a couple of times. It's really nicely structured. I don't have to have it like read pleasingly to the eye because I only want the formulas not to get confused with the data, because the last step here is actually the key filter, which is a formula that does this thing that did not work well when I put it in the prompt, which is to only output companies that are on the original list. Let me quickly show it. This is the original list that I want to know about, and this is how I implemented it. This list is in the GSIs column here, and then my prompt, get the combined company names, which is the combined company names from the 2 LLM runs, and also get the column that contains the companies I actually care about, and then print all matches. It's the simplest version of that, and that means like when we look at the first row, which is Snowflake in this case, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Mindtree. So these are all the companies that are found in the earnings calls. There's some stuff in here, like for example the Snowflake Data Cloud Summit. I get it. It could be a company name. It could not be a company name. Anyways, that's fine. There is like relational AI. I'm not sure, is this a company? Is it a concept? Perfectly fine if that's not exactly true, but a lot of stuff here is just right, like Hex, Kubernetes, JP Morgan, Jeffries. They are actually in here because in the earnings call, analysts from those companies say the names of their companies, and this is why the LLM finds those as company names in the earnings call. But I don't care so much because they are just not on the list I really care about, and they are going to be filtered out. Otherwise, I would have had to make the prompt more complex, of like giving it more of an idea of what's the actual meat of the earnings call and what's kind of the, hey, ignore the company names that are in the Q&A section or whatever. But then you introduce this added layer of complexity that the LLM gets it right, what's the Q&A section versus what's the actual call content. And that's just something where I feel this is an approach that works better, because then my formula looks at all of these companies and just filters out those that shouldn't be in there. And we can do a quick test. Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Mindtree. Okay, so it doesn't work that well because I can't access them anymore, but let's see what happens. Deloitte, okay, so you can't see it, but it actually shows up. Maybe, okay, I won't do it, but I did do it. It's just too cumbersome to show here, but like those companies are actually in the earnings call. And it's just really such a good example, because this same problem that we run in here, I believe, is the problem that also makes a agent not always being able to access it. And this is why the workaround with scraping is happening, because with that I can control much better to work around something like this, around the paywall like this. Anyways, the verification I've done, and what's just like really encouraging are these null results, because that means also like the workflow didn't make stuff up. It doesn't make up a Deloitte or whatever because like it would make sense that it's in there. It's not in there, so it doesn't show up. There are always optimizations that can be done. So I could, for example, see a step that does kind of a fuzzy match, meaning when AWS is whatever, when there's a slight variation on the company name, because I'm using a lot of formulas, that would not catch it as a company in there. But at a certain point, the trade-off comes in. Do I really build something on that level of accuracy, or are we really good with what we are getting from here, which absolutely avoids false positives and catches most of the companies that are in there? And yeah, this is it. This is the very detailed version of this build, including all the prompts, all the settings, and all the kind of prompts for building the formulas. And I think the most important thing here is like looking at the whole thing. Why this approach? What is this approach? And what's different to just asking a Clagent, hey, tell me like which companies this company does work with, because it's good but not accurate enough for a use case like this. If you made it to the end, I don't know, congratulations. And if there are any questions, hit me up, best on LinkedIn. And thanks for watching.